The Crow Ranch stretched across miles of rough Texas earth, a place where every sunrise brought both promise and punishment. Dust and sweat built everything that stood there, and the Crow brothers, Eli and Samuel, were the kind of men who carried that land in their blood. Their father, Jeremiah Crow, had tamed this wilderness with a rifle in one hand and a Bible in the other, but when he died young, it was Eli who took the reins. Samuel, barely 16 at the time, had looked up to his brother like a hero, believing that no man could ride faster, shoot straighter, or dream bigger than Eli Crow. In those early years, it felt like the world belonged to them. They fixed the fences together, branded calves under the hot sun, and sat side by the fire each night, passing a tin cup of whiskey between them. The bond they shared wasn't just blood. It was sweat, laughter, and the kind of silence only brothers understood. Samuel always played the quieter part. Where Eli's voice filled a room, Samuel's steadiness filled the spaces between words. He had no hunger for power or praise. He just wanted a good life, a small family, and the kind of peace their father had spoken of before he died. Then came the summer of 1887, and with it, a dust storm that carried change. When the wind settled, a wagon rolled down the main road, driven by a woman alone. Her name was Clara Whitfield, a widow from Abilene whose husband had been killed in a mining accident. She was looking for honest work and a place to rest her weary bones. Her arrival stirred the quiet rhythm of the ranch. The moment Samuel saw her, leading that stubborn gray mare through the gate, something deep inside him shifted. She wasn't the kind of woman who spoke much, but when she did, her voice was gentle and steady, like rain after a drought. She moved through the ranch with grace, mending clothes, cooking meals, and working harder than most men without ever complaining. Eli noticed her too, though for different reasons. To him, Clara was another challenge, another conquest. He'd always loved being the man everyone looked at, the one women smiled for, the one men envied. He saw how Samuel's eyes followed Clara, saw the way Samuel lingered by the corral when she brought the horses water, and he laughed. "Careful, little brother," he teased one evening, leaning against the porch rail with that trademark smirk. "A woman like that'll break your heart before you can hitch your horse." Samuel said nothing. He'd learned long ago that arguing with Eli was like arguing with a storm. You couldn't win. You could only wait for it to pass. As the months passed, Clara and Samuel grew close in quiet ways. He helped her carry water, fixed her roof when it leaked, and once carved her a wooden charm of a dove. She'd smile shyly when she saw him, and sometimes, when the workday ended, they'd walk along the river, talking about dreams they'd never dared to speak aloud. She told him she missed music, that her husband used to play the fiddle, and that sometimes the silence of the plains scared her. He told her that he'd always been afraid of becoming like Eli, hungry for things that didn't matter. They were gentle moments, small but sacred, and Samuel began to believe that maybe, just maybe, he'd found something pure in a world that rarely offered such grace. Then came the night of the barn dance in town. The lanterns were strung across the square, the air thick with the scent of tobacco and fried dough. Samuel had saved for months to buy Clara a small silver ring from the blacksmith. It wasn't much, but it was honest, and it meant everything he couldn't say out loud. He wore his best shirt, boots polished, heart pounding like a drum. But Clara never showed. As the night dragged on, a strange unease settled over him. Eli was nowhere to be seen either. When Samuel finally left the dance and rode hard for home, he saw a light flickering near Clara's cabin. He dismounted quietly. The sound that reached him wasn't laughter. It was sobbing. He pushed open the door, and the world he'd built inside his heart shattered into pieces. Clara sat on the floor, her dress torn, her eyes wide with terror. Eli stood near the doorway, shirt half open, smelling of whiskey and sin, that same smirk twisting his lips. For a long second, no one spoke. Then Eli laughed, a hollow, cruel sound. "You're too late, Sammy," he said. She didn't want a dreamer. She wanted a real man. Samuel's vision blurred. He didn't move, didn't breathe. He just stood there, staring at the man who was his brother, and realizing he'd never known him at all. Eli brushed past him and staggered out into the night. Clara reached out, voice trembling, whispering Samuel's name, but he couldn't speak. The shame that filled the room was too heavy, too raw. He wanted to comfort her, to tell her it wasn't her fault, but the words died on his tongue. By morning, she was gone. She packed her things and rode out before sunrise, leaving only the small wooden dove he'd carved sitting on the windowsill. From that day forward, the ranch became a graveyard of silence. Eli carried on as if nothing had happened, his swagger louder than ever. He drank more, gambled more, bragged more. Samuel stopped talking altogether. The land that had once felt alive now felt cursed. Every fence post, every shadow reminded him of what had been taken. Sometimes, at night, he'd hear Eli singing, drunkenly by the fire, and he'd feel the gun on his hip grow heavier. Weeks turned into months, and the hate grew inside him like a sickness. He tried prayer. He tried work. Nothing helped. The face of his brother haunted every thought, every dream. The ranch hands started whispering that something had broken in the younger Crow boy, that he'd gone quiet in the soul. They were right. One night, as the moon hung full and bright over the plains, Eli stumbled out of the saloon in town, laughing loud enough to wake the dead. Samuel was waiting for him on the road. He stood still, dust swirling around his boots, eyes hollow. Eli saw him and grinned, tipping his hat. "Come to share a drink, brother?" he slurred. "Or have you finally found your courage?" Samuel didn't answer. His hand hovered over his holster. The silence stretched long and thin like a wire about to snap. "You took everything from me," Samuel said finally, voice low but clear. Eli's grin faded for the briefest second, then returned sharper than before. "I took what was mine to take," he said. "You're too weak to do anything about it." The world went still. One shot cracked through the night, then another. Eli fell backward into the dust, eyes wide, staring at the sky. The echo rolled across the plains, bouncing off the hills, fading slow. Samuel stood over him, the gun trembling in his hand. Eli's chest rose once, then stilled. The silence that followed was worse than any sound Samuel had ever known. He dropped the gun. His knees gave out, and he sank beside his brother's body, the smell of gunpowder burning his throat. By dawn, he buried Eli under the cottonwood tree where they'd played as boys, carving no name into the wooden cross. The sun climbed high, indifferent, as if the world hadn't just changed forever. Samuel sat by that grave until the stars came out, staring at the dirt and wondering if anything good had ever really lived in either of them. When he finally rose, he didn't look back. The ranch lay behind him, silent and cold, and ahead stretched nothing but open land and the long, lonely road that led away from everything he'd ever known. The morning Samuel left the Crow Ranch, the world felt smaller than it ever had. The air was thick with dust, and the sun rose without warmth. He didn't take much, just his father's old rifle, a blanket, and the locket that had once belonged to their mother. He left his brother's grave behind with no words, no prayer, no marker beyond a single crooked cross. As he rode away, the land stretched wide and endless, but it didn't feel like freedom. It felt like exile. He told himself he didn't deserve peace, not after what he'd done, and so he didn't seek it. He rode wherever the wind carried him, as if distance might somehow bury memory. He drifted from town to town, taking whatever work came his way, ranch hand, fence mender, miner. He learned to sleep with one eye open, to eat little, and to drink more. Whiskey dulled the pain, at least for a while. The bottle became his, only companion whispering lies he was too tired not to believe. Some nights, he'd wake up in a stranger's barn, or under a bridge, or lying in the dirt by the railroad tracks, not sure where he was or how he'd gotten there. The face of his brother haunted him like a ghost. Sometimes he'd see Eli in the flicker of a fire, or hear his laugh echo through the wind. Other times, it was Clara's eyes that came to him in dreams, full of pain and pity. Each memory cut him open again, and he welcomed it. Pain meant he was still human, even if barely. Years slipped by like sand through his fingers. Samuel's hair grew long and gray at the edges, his skin turned to leather, and his voice roughened from smoke and silence. The world changed around him. New towns sprang up, railroads carved across the plains. But he remained the same hollow man, always moving, never arriving. He had no name that anyone remembered, no home but the saddle. The people he met called him Old Crow or Sam the Drifter. It didn't matter. He'd stopped caring who he was long ago. One night, in a dusty New Mexico town called Esperanza, he stumbled into a small church. He hadn't meant to. He'd just been looking for a place to get out of the rain. But inside it was warm, lit by a few flickering candles. A man sat near the altar, mending a cracked bench. He wasn't old, maybe in his 30s, with calm eyes that seemed to see more than they should.